She wasn't supposed to survive the night, but when the car flipped and the fire crept closer, it wasn't a stranger who pulled her out. It was him. The man the tabloids called Ice. The man his own family feared. And the second his hands touched her skin, something inside Seo Junwoo that had been dead for years opened its eyes. One wrong turn. One collision. One woman bleeding into the concrete of a Seoul back alley, and the coldest CEO in the country kneeling beside her like his whole empire meant nothing next to her next breath. They warned him never to bring an outsider into the CEO family. They never imagined he'd bring home the one woman who could burn the whole empire down just by being loved. His mother had already chosen his bride. His board had already signed the merger. Then Gina walked into his life bleeding, terrified and utterly unaware that she was about to become the most dangerous thing that ever happened to the CO name. Rain hammered the Seoul Expressway the night everything changed. Headlights smeared to gold streaks, metal screaming against metal, and a woman's scream swallowed by thunder. Gina's car spun twice before it stopped, and through the shattered windshield, a stranger in a black suit ran toward the wreckage like the world had already ended, and only she mattered. He didn't know her name yet. He would spend the rest of his life making sure he never forgot it. Welcome to Afro-Korea TV. Please like, share, and subscribe. Junwoo hadn't meant to be on that road. His driver had taken a detour to avoid traffic from a gala he never wanted to attend, the kind of function where his mother paraded him in front of daughters of conglomerates like he was livestock at auction. He'd been staring out the window, jaw tight, tie already loosened, when the sedan ahead of them fishtailed on the wet asphalt and slammed into the median. He was out of the car before his bodyguard could stop him. Glass crunched under his shoes. Smoke curled from the crushed hood. Inside, a woman was slumped against the wheel, blood tracing a thin line down her temple, her dark curls plastered to her forehead by rain. He wrenched the door open with his bare hands, ignoring the way the metal sliced into his palm. "Can you hear me?" His Korean-accented English cut through the storm. "Stay with me. Don't close your eyes." Her lashes fluttered. Brown eyes, glassy with shock, found his face, and for one suspended second, something passed between them that neither could name. Fear. Recognition. The terrifying sense of being seen. "That's it," he said, quieter now, as he worked her seatbelt free. "I've got you." He carried her away from the car seconds before the engine caught fire behind them, the heat licking at his back as he shielded her body with his own. Sirens wailed in the distance. He didn't let go of her hand until the paramedics forced him to. He should have left it there. A good deed, a headline for tomorrow's papers, nothing more. Instead, he followed the ambulance to the hospital and didn't leave the waiting room for 6 hours. The next day, Gina woke to white walls, the sting of N4 at her arm, and a stranger asleep in the chair beside her bed, still in his rain-ruined suit, his dark hair falling over his forehead, looking nothing like the ruthless CEO she'd later learn half of Seoul was afraid of. "You're awake." His eyes opened the instant she stirred, sharp and alert, like he'd never really been sleeping at all. "You're the man from the accident." Her voice came out cracked, unfamiliar. "Seo Junwoo." He said it like an apology and a warning at once. "You have a concussion, 2 cracked ribs, and a doctor who wants to keep you for observation. Your family has been called." "I made sure of it." She stared at him. "Why did you stay?" He didn't have an answer that made sense, not even to himself. "I don't know," he admitted, and something about the honesty in it startled them both. A nurse bustled in with a tray, throwing a curious glance between the American woman in the bed and the man everyone in this hospital had recognized on sight. The CO Group Air didn't sit in waiting rooms for strangers. But she wasn't a stranger anymore. Not to him. By the end of the week, Gina had been discharged with strict orders to rest, a business card she hadn't asked for, and the disorienting knowledge that Seo Junwoo had personally covered her hospital bill without telling her until the receptionist mentioned it in passing. She found him waiting by the hospital's entrance the day she left, a black car idling at the curb. "I don't need a ride," she said, more defensive than she meant to sound. "You need a ride," he corrected calmly, "because your rental agency confirmed your car is totaled, and it's raining again." She glanced at the gray sky, betrayed by the weather itself.
Fine.
But this doesn't mean anything. I didn't say it did. The corner of his mouth moved, almost a smile, gone before she could be sure of it. The drive was quiet except for the wipers and the low hum of the radio. She studied his profile. The sharp jaw, the exhaustion, he was clearly hiding behind good posture, the way his knuckles were still scraped raw from tearing open her car door. A man who ran one of Korea's largest conglomerates had bled for her, without hesitation. Why does someone like you personally chase down hospital bills for a tourist he pulled out of a car? She finally asked. His eyes flicked to her in the rearview mirror. Because for 1 second on that road, I thought you were going to die in front of me, and I discovered I couldn't accept that. He said it plainly, like a fact rather than a confession, and it landed harder for it. I don't know what to do with that information yet. Gina looked away first, her heart doing something inconvenient and unwise. Neither do I. She'd come to Seoul on a research fellowship, 3 months to study urban design before returning to Atlanta, and she had absolutely no intention of complicating that with a Korean billionaire who apparently made a habit of rescuing her. But intentions, she was learning, meant very little once Seo Junwoo decided something. He showed up outside her rented studio 2 days later with soup her doctor recommended and an excuse about being in the neighborhood that fooled no one, least of all him. You weren't in the neighborhood, she said, arms crossed in the doorway. Your headquarters is 40 minutes from here. I was checking on investment, he said, deadpan. In soup? In you. The words slipped out before he could stop them, and for a man famous for his composure, he looked almost startled by his own honesty. She let him in. It became a pattern neither of them named. He'd appear with some flimsy pretext, a translator for a museum tour she hadn't asked for, a driver already going that way, tickets to an exhibition his assistant had apparently booked without telling her which assistant. Each visit chipped at the wall she'd built, brick by careful brick, even as every instinct told her a man like him, powerful, guarded, engaged to be strategically married off any day now, according to the tabloids she'd made the mistake of Googling, was exactly the kind of complication she couldn't afford. You should stop doing this, she told him one evening. On a rooftop terrace he'd insisted she see at sunset, the city glittering gold and endless beneath them. Doing what? Making me like you. He turned to face her fully, close enough that she could see the war behind his eyes, the version of him raised to calculate every move, standing beside the version that had apparently stopped calculating the moment he saw her bleeding in a crushed car. I'm not trying to make you like me, Gina. I'm trying to figure out how to stop needing to see you every day, and I'm failing spectacularly. The wind pulled a curl loose across her face. He reached up, tucked it back with a gentleness that didn't match anything she'd read about him, and let his hand linger against her jaw a moment too long. Junwoo. I know, he said quietly. I know everything that's wrong with this. My mother would end you socially before dinner. My family doesn't do unscripted. I have a merger riding on a marriage I never agreed to want. His thumb traced her cheekbone, slow, reverent. And none of it has made me want you less. She should have stepped back. She stepped closer instead. The first crack in the fragile piece came at a gallery opening his company was sponsoring, the kind of event Gina hadn't intended to attend until Junwoo's assistant delivered an invitation to her door with a note that simply read, I want you there. She wore green, borrowed confidence, and watched him work a room like a man born to command it, all cool authority and clipped Korean, nothing like the man who'd sat in a hospital chair all night for her. Until a woman in a red gown latched onto his arm with the easy familiarity of history between them. Han Sarah. A nearby guest murmured to Gina, not unkindly, mistaking her for simply another attendee. Textile heiress. Everyone assumed she and Director Seo would announce something this year. Gina watched Sarah's manicured hand rest on Junwoo's forearm, watched her laugh at something too close to his ear, and felt something ugly and unfamiliar twist low in her stomach. She turned toward the bar, instead of toward him. He found her within 4 minutes. You left, he said, low, urgent, ignoring the way Sarah's eyes tracked him across the room. You looked busy. I looked trapped. His hand found the small of her back, proprietary in a way that made her breath catch despite herself. Sarah and I ended before we began. My mother keeps reviving it because it's convenient for the company. It isn't convenient for me. You don't owe me an explanation. I owe you the truth. His eyes were dark, unreadable to anyone but her. And the truth is I spent that entire conversation wondering if you'd already left, and the idea of you walking out of that door without me made it very difficult to keep smiling at people I don't care about. Across the room, Sarah watched them with expression that had nothing friendly in it. She doesn't like me, Gina said. She doesn't know you, he corrected. I'd like to keep it that way as long as possible. His jaw tightened, something dangerous flickering there. She's not the one you should worry about, Gina. If she says anything to you, anything, you come to me. Do you understand? The possessiveness in his voice should have alarmed her. Instead, it settled something in her chest she hadn't realized was unsteady. A few days later, the storm that had been building broke. Gina was leaving a cafe near her apartment when a photographer she hadn't noticed stepped out from a parked car, camera raised, flash blinding. By the time she blinked the spots from her vision, 3 more had appeared, shouting questions in rapid Korean and broken English. Who is she? Is this the American director CO has been seen with? Does the CO family know? She didn't have to understand every word to understand the trap closing around her. Junwoo's car screeched to the curb before she'd taken 3 panic steps, and he was out of it in an instant, cutting between her and the cameras like a wall built specifically for this purpose, his voice dropping into something cold and commanding that scattered the photographers faster than any security guard could have. Get in the car, he said to her, gentler now, guiding her with a hand at her back. Inside, with the doors locked and the city blurring past the windows, she finally let her hand shake. How did they know where I was? His jaw was granite. Someone told them. His phone buzzed, a text he read, and then set face down on his knee like it had burned him. My mother knows about you. Gina's stomach dropped. And she wants to meet you. He looked at her, something unreadable and heavy behind his eyes. Tonight. The CO family estate sat behind iron gates and 2 centuries of pride, and Gina felt every inch of that history pressing down on her the moment she stepped into the marble foyer. Junwoo's hand found hers before the doors even closed behind them. Whatever she says, he murmured, you're not walking into this alone. His mother, Madame CO, was already waiting in the drawing room, seated like a queen holding court, her silk hanbok pristine, her eyes assessing Gina from the doorway with the precision of a woman who had spent decades reading people for weakness. So this is her. Madame CO didn't rise. The woman my son nearly caused a diplomatic incident over, chasing off photographers in the street like a common bodyguard. Yomioni. Junwoo's voice carried a warning Gina had never heard from him before. I'm simply stating what half of Seoul watched on the evening news. Madame CO's gaze didn't leave Gina. Tell me, Miss Carter, Gina said, steadying her voice. Gina Carter. Miss Carter, do you understand what you're doing to this family? The board is finalizing the Han merger next quarter. My son's marriage was meant to secure it. And now there are photographs of him defending a foreign researcher outside a coffee shop as though she were something worth defending. She is, Junwoo said, quiet and absolute. His mother's composure flickered, just barely. You would throw away everything this family built for infatuation. I would throw away a merger I never agreed to for a woman who ran into a burning car's aftermath with me and didn't ask what it would cost her. His hand tightened around Gina's. I'm not asking your permission, Mother. I'm informing you. The silence that followed was its own kind of violence. Madame CO finally rose, crossing the room slowly until she stood directly in front of Gina, close enough to study the set of her jaw, the way she hadn't flinched once through the entire exchange. You're not what I expected, Madame CO said at last, something almost grudging in it. I get that a lot, Gina replied evenly. A ghost of something, not quite approval, but not hostility either, crossed the older woman's face before she turned away. This conversation isn't finished, but it's over for tonight. At the door, she paused without turning. Junwoo, the Han family will not simply disappear because you've made a decision. The threat in it settled over the room like a held breath. The following morning, The danger Madame CO had promised arrived faster than either of them expected. Gina's research advisor called to inform her, carefully, awkwardly, that her fellowship's local sponsor had suddenly reconsidered her housing stipend, effective immediately. When she called the sponsor's office, the woman on the line cited administrative restructuring in a tone that made it clear this wasn't administrative at all. She confronted Junwoo about it at his office that evening, fury and fear tangled together in her voice. Someone pulled my funding, Junwoo. Someone with enough reach to make an entire program disappear my sponsorship overnight. His expression went dark and still, the CEO mask sliding fully into place for the first time she'd seen directed at anything but a boardroom. Han Group funds that fellowship program. Sarah's family. So this is retaliation. For you. For us, he corrected grimly, already dialing his assistant. This ends now. Junwoo, don't. She caught his wrist. Don't make this bigger than it already is. Gina. He turned to face her fully, cupping her face in both hands, his voice dropping into something raw. You didn't ask for any of this. You didn't ask to be photographed, threatened, or defunded because a family who has no claim on me decided you were an obstacle. I will not stand by while they punish you for something I started. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. Let me protect you. Just this once, let me. Her anger cracked, just slightly, against the intensity in his eyes. This is exactly what I was afraid of, she whispered. That being near you would cost me everything I came here to build. Then let me help you build something bigger. He was true to his word. Within 2 days, Junwoo had personally guaranteed her research funding through the CO Foundation, cutting Han Group's leverage out entirely, a move that sent a clear, public message through Seoul's business circles. The CO heir had chosen a side, and it wasn't the merger. The Han family did not take it quietly. The rumors started subtle, a gossip column suggesting Gina was chasing money, a leaked and falsified claim about her research credentials. Then they turned uglier, crueler, laced with the kind of cruelty designed to make her feel unwelcome in a country and a life she'd only just begun to imagine sharing with him. She read the worst of it alone in her apartment, curled on the floor with her phone glowing accusations at her, and didn't hear Junwoo let himself in until he was kneeling in front of her, gently prying the phone from her hands. Don't read any more of it, he said. How am I supposed to ignore it? Her voice broke. They're saying I don't belong here. That I trapped you. That. She couldn't finish it. They're saying it because they're afraid, he said fiercely, framing her face with both hands, forcing her eyes to his. Afraid of a woman strong enough to walk into my world and refuse to shrink herself for it. Gina, look at me. None of what they're saying is true, and every person who matters to me already knows that. But what if it never stops? What if I'm always going to be the reason your family loses everything? Then we lose it together, he said simply. Or we build something they can't touch. His forehead dropped to hers, both of them breathing the same unsteady air. I've spent my entire life being the version of myself my family required. You are the first thing I have ever wanted that had nothing to do with obligation. His voice roughened. I love you, Gina. I don't know when it happened. I only know I can't undo it, and I don't want to. The words hung between them, impossibly fragile and impossibly certain at once. Junwoo. You don't have to say it back tonight, he said quickly, some of his composure fracturing into something almost boyish, almost afraid. I just needed you to know it before you decided whether any of this was worth staying for. She answered him not with words, but by closing the distance between them entirely, her hands fisting in his shirt, his arms banding around her like he'd been waiting his whole life for permission to hold on. The kiss was slow at first, searching, years of restraint unraveling between them, and then it wasn't slow at all, both of them pulled under by something neither could have out-argued if they'd tried. The lights stayed low. The rest of the night belonged only to them, to whispered names and trembling hands and the particular silence of two people finally choosing each other without armor, without calculation, without anything held back. When dawn found them tangled together, breath still uneven, it felt less like an ending to the storm and more like the eye of it. She was gone before he woke. Junwoo's hand found cold sheets where she should have been, and something close to panic seized him before he found her note on the kitchen counter, her handwriting hurried, uneven.
I'm sorry.
I got scared. I keep waiting for you to realize what loving me actually costs you, and I couldn't stay to watch it happen.
Gee.
He read it twice before the fear turned to fury. Not at her, never at her, but at every version of the world that had taught her love was something to brace against instead of something to trust.
He didn't call.
He went to find her. Her studio was empty, her research office locked for the weekend, and it was her advisor, reached through 3 increasingly frantic calls, who finally mentioned Gina had asked about earlier flights back to Atlanta. He made it to Incheon Airport with 40 minutes before her flight, sprinting through the terminal past a security detail that couldn't keep pace, ignoring the phones raised to film the spectacle of director Seo Junwoo running through public departures like a man whose entire life depended on the next 60 seconds. He found her at the gate, boarding pass in hand, tears she hadn't quite finished crying still tracking down her face. Gina. She turned, and the sight of him, disheveled, breathless, utterly stripped of the composure the whole country knew him for, broke something loose in her chest. You shouldn't be here, she said weakly. And you shouldn't be leaving. He closed the distance, hands framing her face like they had that night, like they always would. I'm not letting you run from this because you're scared of what it costs me. I already told you, I don't care what it costs. I care about you not being in my life. His voice cracked. Please. Don't get on that plane, because you're protecting me from a choice I already made a long time ago. Everyone I love, I end up losing, she whispered, the truth finally spilling out, raw and unguarded. My mother. My last relationship. I thought if I left first, it wouldn't hurt as much when your family finally won. My family isn't going to win, he said fiercely, because I am not a prize they get to fight over. I choose you, Gina. Publicly, permanently, completely. Marry me, and let me spend the rest of my life proving that some people don't leave. Around them, a dozen strangers had stopped to watch, phones raised, the moment already becoming the story Seoul would talk about for weeks. Neither of them noticed. Junwoo, this is insane. Yes or no, he said, something desperate and sure in his eyes. I'm not asking you to be brave forever. I'm asking you to be brave for the next 5 seconds. Her hand found his jacket, fisting into the fabric the way it had that night, and this time, she didn't let go. Yes, she breathed. God help me, yes. The Han family's retaliation reached its most dangerous point 2 weeks later, when Gina's request for a routine visa extension was mysteriously flagged, delayed, and finally denied under manufactured pretenses, a bureaucratic trap engineered, Junwoo's investigators confirmed, by someone inside the Han conglomerate with enough government connections to make it happen quietly. She had 72 hours to leave the country or face detention. They think this ends it, Junwoo said grimly, standing in his office at midnight surrounded by lawyers, immigration specialists, and the quiet fury of a man who had built an empire specifically capable of undoing something like this. They're wrong. He didn't sleep for 2 days. He called in favors across 3 government ministries, exposed the falsified paperwork trail leading directly back to a Han Group executive, and personally testified before an immigration review board that the woman they were trying to deport was his fiancée, a fact he made sure every reporter in the building heard clearly. The scandal that broke wasn't about Gina anymore. It was about Han Group's corruption, and by the time it was finished unraveling, Sarah's father had resigned from 2 boards, and the merger Madame Seo had once pinned her hopes on was permanently, publicly dead. Madame Seo watched it all unfold from her drawing room, and when Junwoo finally came to see her afterward, braced for another battle, she surprised him. She fought harder for her place here than half the daughters-in-law I considered acceptable, his mother said, staring into her tea. I don't approve of how this happened. But I will not stand against a woman who survived what I put her through and still chose to stay. It wasn't an embrace. It wasn't even warmth, not yet. But it was a door left open, and for Junwoo, that was enough of a beginning. They married in early spring, in a ceremony smaller than the CO name usually demanded and exactly as large as Gina wanted it, her mother flown in from Atlanta, Junwoo's grandmother's hanbok altered to fit her, vows spoken in two languages neither of them stumbled over because they'd practiced them for weeks, laughing at each other's mistakes. Madame Sio sat in the front row. She did not smile through the entire ceremony, but she did not leave early either, and when Gina passed her afterward, she reached out and briefly, deliberately, took her hand. "Welcome to the family," she said, and meant it more than either of them expected. A year later, Junwoo came home to find Gina sitting on their balcony overlooking the city that had once tried so hard to reject her, a small white stick resting on the table beside her, her hands pressed protectively over her stomach. He didn't say anything at first. He simply knelt in front of her chair the way he had knelt beside a burning car the night everything began, and pressed his forehead to her still flat abdomen like a man finally, fully home. "We're really doing this," he murmured. "We're really doing this," she confirmed, threading her fingers through his hair. Outside, Seoul glittered on, indifferent to the storm they'd survived to get here. The rumors, the sabotage, the family that had once sworn she'd never belong. None of it had won. Love, stubborn and unshakable, had. "I love you," he said, the words no longer fragile, no longer a confession made in the dark, but a promise spoken in full daylight, unafraid. "I will never stop choosing you." She pulled him up into a kiss that tasted like everything they'd fought for, and somewhere below them, the city lights blurred into gold, the same color as the headlights on the night a stranger ran through the rain and refused to let her go. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Afro Korea TV for more.